everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had wonderful, deep discussions in your breakout sessions. The conversation you've all been waiting for is about expanding sources of funding for the field. How do we get really creative finding new sources of funding? And our moderator, once again, is Ryan Greer.
Thank you, Brett, and thank you to the whole Eradicate Hate team. I think it goes without saying this has been a phenomenal conference, so thank you all for all the hard work. So, as Brett says, we're here to talk about new funding for the hate-fueled violence prevention field, and my name is Ryan Greer, and I'm president of Bedrock, which is a partnership of 68 organizations. We added one since yesterday, 68 organizations focused on U.S. hate-fueled violence prevention and working together to solve that challenge. So as we get into this discussion, I'm going to kick us off probably where you expect me to kick us off, which is to talk about condiments like ketchup and mustard. Bear with me. During the Great Depression, it was less common for people to add condiments to their food because they were penny pinching. So the great Heinz Corporation, based in the great city of Pittsburgh, innovated. They created a new size, a smaller container for condiments that made them cheaper to buy and changed how we buy condiments forever. Bear with me for another example. The Michelin Tire Company, responding to economic downturn from World War I, during a new car market, invented a guide to restaurants and hotels so that people would have attractions to go to in their cars, and laid the foundation for the modern automobile market. Last example, Airbnb. Founded during the Great Recession in 2008 as a way to make some spare cash without needing the startup capital of a professional landlord. Okay, why do I share these stories? Economic hardship led to creativity, to innovation, and over the long term, to growth, and they changed the world. So too will the hate-fueled violence prevention sector innovate, grow, and change the world. But first, we will go through economic hardship. We need to be clear-eyed about the fact that we are currently in a sector recession globally for our work, as countries worldwide revise down their budgets for hate-fueled violence prevention. I can really only speak to the US experience, but here in the US, in a good year, we spend 25% that of our peer countries like the UK and Canada on hate-fueled violence prevention. A whopping 64% of that is federal grants, which are largely or entirely going away, which means we're on track to spend 8% that of our peer countries. In practice, it'll be higher than that only because our peer countries are also cutting their budgets. We need to adapt or die. So we at Bedrock asked our partners, how are you adapting? And a plurality of them, 36%, said by trying to find new funding, particularly in private philanthropy. We are in the era of adapt or die. But in so doing, we will be creative, we will innovate, and over the long term, we will grow, and we will change the world to be safer and more conducive to belonging for targeted communities. So how do we do that adapting? We have a couple leading experts and leaders here to help us navigate this, who come at it from a different vantage point. So Antoine Baudin is the head of finance for the Egmont Group, and he has worked at the renowned ICCT, and he knows his way around being creative to raise revenue. And Elise Marshall, who has had laudable roles at the Department of Education and Walmart, but is now the head of corporate affairs and impact at the large tech company Pinterest. Thank you both for your leadership and partnership every day. Thank you for taking the time to tackle what is our sector's largest challenge. And so with that, let's get started with some opening remarks, and I think Antoine's gonna get us kicked off. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being here. And thank you for Ryan and Elise and the Eradicate team of creating a panel on such an important topic, and it's a very urgent topic. So as Ryan said, my name is Antoine Baudon. I'm the Finance and Administrative Director of the Egmont Institute. It's a think tank in Belgium, which is the Royal Institute of International Relations. And before that, I worked at the International Center of Counterterrorism as the business manager and deputy director. And my role for both think tank and other NGOs and think tanks in Europe and in Africa was to adapt our funding to the changing landscape of donors, or when I was at the Red Cross, when things go bad. So how do we adapt so that we can keep sustainability in our work, which is very similar to the work you're all doing, work to help people. And as Brian said, there's a big crunch in the US on donors. There's also a big one in Europe. I mean, I'm French, I can say this, there's no more money in France. There's very little money in the Netherlands, there's very little in Belgium, but it's not getting the same media attention. And unfortunately, what that's causing is the organization are making hard choices. They are reallocating resources where they don't necessarily want to. And we've also seen this very weird dynamic where we're seeing consultancies coming into our space. So we have more competition. And that's proven that a lot of organizations are then looking to diversify, to look into new funders. If you consider your current program with only one donor or two donors, you have all your eggs in the same basket. And that's pretty dangerous, because if that dries up, it's going to be hard for you to manage. But if you diversify, which is the whole point of diversification, if one dries up, you can manage that. And diversification is donor or donor types, right? There's different types. So we've had very different panels here in Eradicate Hate, and I really enjoyed this on those new donors. There was one on philanthropy, which you were on, I believe, Ryan. There's one on private sectors. There was on discussion on local and state actors. There was one on international. So there's many more opportunities. And talking to many people, I've had many talk to me, oh, but Antoine, we're too small. We're irrelevant to go to these donors. They want programs of 1 million. We can't handle that. And I would say, to sort of kick off or give a preview of the discussion we'll have, well, we can apply for funding together as a community. We keep talking here that we're a community, and I think we are, and we should apply to donors together. So, as we say, the donor gets more bang for their bucks. Instead of having one project here, they're all over the country or maybe across. And the idea here really is to create a call to action for us. This funding crisis, call to action for us to be creative. Who do we want to talk to? Why are we important to them? How can they help us beyond the financial means or their non-financial means they can help? We need to change our communication. We need to change our relationship with one another. And what I've seen over the years is really four-pronged approach to creating a new strategy towards innovation. First of all, talk to your donors. If they don't know you, they're unlikely to fund you. And you can talk on shared priorities, shared values. If you're on the same page, great. If you're not, that's okay, because then you can take that knowledge, and that brings us to number 2, to the networking. When you're at events like Eradicate Hate and others, you can tell people, oh, I've met this donor, they really like when you talk about this, and I've met this one, don't talk about that. Share the best stories, share the best practices. And I've done this many times, sorting through pages and pages of grants. It's a bit mind-numbing, yes, but it's important. And I've seen someone go, this isn't for us, but that'd be great for them. So I share it to them. I share to my network. This is a grant. Have you seen it? Take a look. I think it could work. Is it interested or not? It depends, but that's part of the networking. Third is data. You all do amazing work. You have data. You can prove your impact. Show it to donors. Tell your story. Tell your impact. We just had a wonderful breakout session on M&E. Evidence-based work opens doors. Do that. And number 4, please believe in yourself. Really believe in yourself. Try to go to new donors. Don't be afraid. I do not want to imagine what our field would be if we all went on strike for a month and a half to get more funding. That would be horrendous. But take a chance. The French lottery had a motto for a while, which was every winner tried his luck. Now, I'm not saying go gamble. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not advocating for gambling. But I'm advocating for go ahead, take a chance, talk to new donors. Yes, it takes time, but it's an efficient use of your time. Because I believe that I'm actually hopeful that this funding gap with innovation, creativity, communication, and collaboration, we can bridge this gap, but also create for ourselves strategies that can weather what is going to come next, and we can come out of this stronger. And as Ryan said exactly, economic hardship creates strong people, strong organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Elise?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having us here and for this important topic. And good afternoon, everyone. I guess it's afternoon now. I'm Elise Marshall. As Ryan mentioned, I lead the Corporate Affairs and Social Impact team at Pinterest. and have the good fortune of leading all of our philanthropic work as well, which includes the ways in which we partner with NGOs and community-based organizations to advance our shared values. And I think that something that you touched on is really important, which is you really can't get to the next step in a conversation with a funder without understanding what their mission and vision of success looks like. As a corporate entity, I think that people tend to put us in this box of advancing our commercial interest. But at Pinterest, one of the things that we are really driven by right now is how can we advance a safe and positive experience for our over 500 million users around the world, both online and off. And we can't do that work on our own. It takes a broad collective impact of organizations at every level, at the community level, at the national and global level, to be able to advance that mission. So I would say that, yes, +1 to everything that you touched on, but I would say, also understanding what is going to sort of motivate the folks that are sitting on the other side of the conversation to really partner with you. And that is looking at everything that they have said, both publicly, everything that the CEO is out there talking about. We have been very deliberate and vocal about our focus on supporting young people, for example, and supporting their mental health and emotional well-being online and off. We know that every group here is critical to that point. And so I think being really thoughtful about what is it that company or that private funder or the government that you're talking to is trying to advance, and making it very clear how you together can work in lockstep with them to help advance that. The other thing I would touch on is that we really try to think about how do we go beyond the check, right? So not limiting or starting the conversation from just a funding aspect. Corporations, especially large multinational corporations like Pinterest, we have a ton of in-house expertise. So when we talk about addressing things like hate-fueled violence or hate speech online, we have a very sophisticated team of experts in-house that are building new models and systems and developing a airtight set of community guidelines about what content we're going to allow on our platform. We need to be working in close partnership with organizations on the ground who are seeing trends that we may not be catching on to, that may have something to offer on that set of policies that we have set forth. So we really try to look for ways to partner with corporations, both through in-kind support, so thinking about volunteer time off programs that many companies have. That's not just Pinterest. So you've got to think about what are other sources of support that you can tap into for organizations. I know that's true for the corporate sector, but also for the private philanthropic sector. The last thing I would say, and then we can get into the questions, is trying to think about what are the ways in which you're working in coalition with other groups with like-minded values. As head of corporate affairs for a major company, I'm constantly talking to lots of different groups, with some with shared interests, some with different interests. What's really helpful for me is understanding that when I'm talking to one group that has connections with a broad landscape of other groups, that through supporting them, I'm not just backing them individually, but I'm backing a huge coalition of partners. So really thinking about when you are putting proposals together for corporate funders that, hey, you're not just working independently with one single organization, but you as an organization are working in concert with many different actors and groups who can advance your shared goals.
Amazing, thank you. I'm hearing partnerships and relationship building. I'm hearing data. I'm hearing believe in yourself. And I'm loving all of that. You're speaking my language. Let's make sure, I don't want to yada yada the best part here. Like, help us get a sense of just the framework of the spectrum of options. And we'll start with Elise here in a second, but there's corporate philanthropy, there's private philanthropy, there's in-kind giving, all sorts of types of relationships you can have. Like, how can I orient my thinking around what types of options are out there? So maybe at least get us started.
Yeah, well, I think, one is segmenting it by the type of organization that you're talking to and really understanding the company that you are speaking to. I'll speak just to the corporate sector for a second, but nearly every company has a division like corporate affairs, which is corporate social responsibility, corporate impact, and all of them, nearly all of them, have to publish public reports about what are the things that they are primarily focused on. And I think so making sure that before you even enter the conversation, it's really helpful to know that an organization or a coalition of partners has done their homework on what matters most to us as a company. What are the unique problems or challenges that we are trying to solve for? And then from there, coming into the conversation saying, hey, I know as Pinterest, you all are intent on creating a more positive space online for young people, for example. Recognizing that is a key priority for us and starting there, and then letting the organization or company walk you through, well, these are the different options that we can that are at our disposal to be able to partner on this challenge together. So starting from the frame of what is the challenge, the shared challenge or goal that you, the organization, and the company have in common. What is the common challenge that we're trying to start for? And let that start sort of framing that challenge, and then putting the onus on the company to say, what are the various options that we have here? So not limiting it to, hey, we want to apply for this specific grant program, or hey, we want to work with your team of experts to advance this challenge. Just framing the challenge up front, or what is the North Star or the ambition level that we both have in common, and then allowing the companies such as Pinterest to walk you through what the different options are.
Amazing. Antoine?
Amazing food for thoughts. That's exactly what I try to do in my work. And to take it a step backwards, before you go into those meetings, sit down with your team, because these are collaborative efforts, not just the CEO and the CFO, it's all the program managers, it's sometimes even the interns, to try to come, what are we doing here? What do we want to do? We want to go to the donor. What do we want from them? Do we just want cash? That's not going to happen. But do we want a project? Do we want to work with them? Do we want to work through them? How do we want? For example, I applied for a project for the European Union, and Pinterest was part of a consortium. We needed 2 experts. Unfortunately, we didn't get it because they canceled the funding. Sorry to say. But it was actually quite amazing to be with Pinterest and to work with them on a shared idea. So it's really what you said, but from the beginning, you want to know, what does your organization do? And sometimes you can go to one of the events, you meet a potential partner, and it's not the right one for you. And I think that's also okay to say, I don't want to work with these people, simply either because it doesn't align or there's something that doesn't fit, and that's okay. But once you find a person or the group that you want to talk to, really build that relationship based on what you want to do. And as you said, I like this idea of the North Star. What's the goal? What's the crazy goal we want to achieve? And how can you help me one step further on that? And by sharing those visions, sharing that idea, you're giving context to the donor what you're doing. And you guys are expert. You know your field. You know your work. Talk from your heart. Talk from what you've done. Talk about all your experiences. Share those experiences. Share those values. And make the donor dream that they can be a part of that, that their assistance, whether financially, in kind or whatnot, can help you achieve that, and make them have some skin in the game a little bit.
I think it also, framing it from what's the shared ambition or shared goal that we have, helps solve a problem for that company, right? When you are sitting down with whether it's a private funder or a corporate entity, especially one with global reach and scale, there is a laundry list of unique challenges that organization is trying to solve for at any given moment. So starting from, hey, this is an issue that I know is important to you, or this is a challenge, a shared challenge that we are trying to address together. Here's how our organization or our network of organizations or a coalition that you're working in, this is how we can work together in deep partnership to help address that challenge together. And then it flips it from, hey, I'm asking for resources, to, hey, how can I solve a problem for you that I know you're trying to solve?
Yeah, the challenge needs to, whatever the challenge might be, hate, fuel, violence, let's say, requires a full mosaic across a broad spectrum of beautiful, unique snowflakes coming together, as mixing metaphors here, as little puzzle pieces that create the broader fabric. And those little pieces are stakeholders and partners, right? And so take a minute on this partnership component, because it's interesting that, in a way, the funders and the fundee are partners. There's a transaction there, but it's to do something together. And what's more is the funder and the fundee are each independently working with their own partners. Practitioners work with practitioners, funders work with funders work with other practitioners. So it's an ecosystem, right? So how can we build our ecosystem in the right way, understand our role and how to partner, and just this sense of like we're all in this together. How do we navigate that partnership-wise?
I'll just give the example of the Youth Mental Health Corps because I think it really does speak to everything that you're getting at. So in end of 2022, the then U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy came out with a report on the youth mental health crisis in the U.S. And in it, he really called in the technology sector to help be a part of the solution. So of course, us, being a major platform, and I know that a lot of people tend to put us in the Midwestern Moms Recipes app bucket, and we are that, and that's not disparaging Midwestern moms. I am the biggest Midwestern mom. But 50% of our user base now being young people, we started to interrogate what are the things that we could be doing, not just through our content safety policies, and how we sort of tune our product for well-being and measure for that, but also thinking about how could we meet young people where they were. Now we're Pinterest. We certainly can't solve for something like the youth mental health crisis on our own. So we recognized very early on that we needed to work in close partnership with both the public sector, meaning governments, and working in close partnership with organizations and experts in the field of mental health and emotional well-being with a specific lens on young people. So we went to people who were smarter than us. We talked to some of the organizations that we fund in the space. We went and talked to folks like the Schultz Family Foundation, our partners in this work, who've been deeply engaged in national service for a long time. And we said, what could we do to meet this moment, to meet the urgency of this moment, and meet young people in communities where the crisis is being most disproportionately felt right now, which is in schools and in communities. And so we built the nation's first youth mental health corps, where we are actively training 18 to 25-year-olds to serve as youth mental health navigators in schools and community-based organizations. Now, that took, a ton more than just Pinterest, more than our expertise to pull that off. It took more than our resources to pull that off. It took a network of folks that were committed to the central premise of how do we create a context both online and in real life where young people feel supported, they feel safe, they feel seen, they feel invested in. And that is, I think a very clear example for everyone in this room is that corporations cannot work on their own. And I think many of them, like Pinterest, recognize this. And so trying to understand what are the unique, bold, deeply intractable issues like hate-fueled violence they're trying to solve for, and how can we bring in partners to help them so that they're not having to try to go at this alone. So that is, just one very clear example of how groups like all of you can be working in concert with the private sector and public sector.
Don't go it alone. Great theme for the conference. Antoine.
Well, exactly. It's not going alone, and to not go alone, you need to meet the people. So the first thing we always do is, again, go talk to the donors. We were living in The Hague, so we went to Brussels, which train right away, an hour and a half. Spend a day talking to different donors. So you're in humongous meeting rooms that are for 500 people. There's maybe 6 of us, 12 of them, people you don't know, and you start talking of the project you're doing. I'm doing the talking of presenting my researchers, presenting the project managers, and they're the ones speaking of their project, of what they do, what they're passionate about. I mean, we had colleagues who were so passionate about foreign fighters in Ukraine or youth radicalization in the Netherlands, talking to other very passionate people, and then you exchange business cards, and that's it. You don't talk about concept notes, you don't talk about funding, you just exchange names, exchange numbers, meet people, see who they are, see what they do, what they like, and you obviously come prepared, so you can have different topics. It usually goes well because people are in the room, they want to listen to you. And once you have those business cards, or you have those names or you met in conferences, then you engage in conversation, trying to understand what is the donor doing, what's their interest, and you share your stories. Again, you're not talking yet of financing, that really comes afterwards. And either they will say, send me a concept note, send me an idea, or say, oh, we're gonna have some calls on those days, I'd really like you to apply, or say, well, what can we do? There's very different options, but you want to open that door. That I would say is the easiest. Opening doors is the easiest. Then you have to apply for the funding. That's always, the thing that ends at midnight on a Friday. But, sorry, honey, she knows. And then once you have the project, it's continuing that relationship. It is having a kickoff meeting, telling them, okay, so remember, we're going to do this, so we're still on the same page, we're doing this. Sending them updates, emails, hey, we just had an event in Bratislava, it went super well. We had someone go to Public Safety Canada to eradicate hate. That went super well. They presented the project, and you tell the donor name, you attach the donor to the project, and you make them live it on your web page, or you have a project page, and you list the donors, so you really create that relationship. And then you close the project, and you say thank you. People were surprised when I used to say thank you for the project, but I think it's normal. And then you create that relationship, and you continue it afterwards. And sometimes, when I was with the Red Cross, you would invite the donors in the field. Oh, you're in the capital? No. Come to the bush. I've got for you a great tent. It's gonna be awful. You're gonna hate it. You're gonna have a lovely time. Oh, they hated it, but they loved it because they got to see what we were living. They got to see the impact we were doing, and they got to meet the beneficiaries. So they got to see where, in essence, their money was going, and they got to see it, and they have understood why can we not help more people when we physically can't. The center's too small. So it really puts them, as I said, skin in the game, get them involved, and the relationship ends. So either it ends and there's nothing else, but that's fine, but they will talk well about you. Or then there's something else coming afterwards. But once you've developed that relationship that kept it alive all throughout the project, they will speak well about you, you will speak well about them, and that will create more opportunities, open more doors. So it's really about keep that relationship alive, talk to your donors, see what they want, and involve them as much as possible. And I would say it's the same whether it's the private sector, the public sector, whatever donor, everyone should be treated as you have a skin in the game, and let me show you what you're doing, and invite them over.
I think that is that's so critical. It changes the dynamic of the relationship when you bring the funder in at the strategy level and not just the tactical level, right? So moving beyond just the transactional. Yes, there is a transactional element of that partnership, but I think bringing them in, helping them see behind the hood, under the hood, what is the strategic planning process? How much thought and rigor are you putting into it? How are you thinking about how data and evidence play into your approach? Who are the new partners that you're trying to cultivate and bring into the space with you? Not waiting until just when the impact report is due at the end, every 6 months or at the end of the year to tell that story, but really bringing the funder along in the process will help them both understand what's at stake and understand it might uncover new opportunities that may not even be apparent to the organization, ways that the funder might be able to support beyond just the monetary piece.
No, you're absolutely right. And I would say in my case, the dream was that the donor would create their yearly strategy based on what we've been doing. So we did a project.
Yes.
Oh, now we need to look at this, and this, and I see donor priorities. So the ICCT said we need to do this, we're going to do that. And I really believe every organization can do this because you've shown your donor, we've done the step. We're not done. There's more work to be done. Let me show you what we think the steps would be done, and that guides them. You don't want to say forces them, but it guides them into making decisions that follow onto the program. And if you win, great. If someone else wins, also great. But you're still moving forward, and we're not reinventing the wheel.
Just one last example, and then we can move on to your next question. But we just recently had an organization that is dealing with, very topic of this conversation, which is reductions in funding. And so they came to us and they said, not increase our funding with, they weren't making an ask from a grant perspective for us. But they asked us instead, can you spend an hour, 90 minutes with us even, to just help us think through what our strategy for the next 5 years looks like. So they, were able to leverage it. And what that does is gives them insight into our thinking and how we're crafting our strategy. What are the issues we're trying to solve for? But it also, that is, 90 minutes of consulting support too, of saying help us, let's dig in together, let's roll our sleeves up together and think about how we can solve this. What's missing from the field that you as an organization may not be seeing, but me sitting at a more global level, I'm able to see where the gaps are. So I think bringing us in, not just when it's pretty and everything is buttoned up with a bow around it, not just at the launch of the new initiative, but just actually bringing us in at that more strategic, on the ground, parsing out the challenges that you're trying to solve for. Bringing us into that conversation is actually really illuminating, and there's value on both sides.
Help me think about this concretely, because there's some tension here. One tension is mission alignment. And I want to talk about the tech sector in a second. But first, let me start, Antoine, maybe with you. Another tension is like time and capacity. And so if I could push back on a panelist earlier in the summit who mentioned, don't wait till you get funding, just start your work. And all due respect to that person who I think had the best of intentions in mind there, but my kids eat food and need shelter. I can't just do work for free. And so there's this kind of, catch-22 of I need to put in the work to tell you how great I am. But then, I'm reminded of Jenny Slate's character in Parks and Rec. Money, please. I need cash. I need the cash. So how do we manage these tensions, whether it's time management or finding the right partner? All due respect, not all tech companies are the same, as you well know, and we've all seen. But maybe start with Antoine and then Elise.
This has been the most difficult part of my time. A lot of time for project in the EU, you have to give a day rate. So the day rate is simple. How much does your staff cost you? Divide by the number of working days, that's the day rate. So in Europe, we take the number of 365, remove the weekends, remove the public holidays, remove the European holidays, remove the idea of sick days, and you get about 200 days of work days. But if I want to give my staff 20 days dedicated to acquisition, as we would say, day and a half a month more or less, well, the day rate isn't over 180, it's over 200. So that increases how much they cost. And I know I'm talking very technical financing, but that's the math we're doing in essence. I can calculate how much it costs me in time and in euros to do acquisition. And I can see this as an investment. And that's the only way I can justify it either to my board, to my director, is to say, last quarter, as a company, we spent 2,000 hours on acquisition. Now, of course, my time, and I had a junior business officer helping me, that's normal that we do all the work. But for the researchers, that's a lot of time. And we justify by saying that's our model. So for us, that was our model. It's an investment. But then it's also very difficult because then you're more expensive and potentially a bit less competitive. So it's always keeping in mind of saying, if you want to go for it, as I was saying earlier, prong number 4, believe in yourself. Don't go for any random acquisition. Really try to target it. Try to figure out from the beginning who you want to talk to, what do you want to go for, and commit to it. Sometimes you're going to see grants. I've just received one this morning. It's 70 pages. It's going to take me a long time to read it. Well, I hope we go for it. If we don't, that's fine. That's my job. My research team will look into it if we believe it's right for them, so that we can focus their time as much as possible on something we think we're going to win, something that's useful. And that's also why I really like building coalition with other partners, because when you have consortiums for projects that are 4 years, 40 million euros with tenders of 120 page, you want to split the work amongst people. And that increases your chances, makes it a bit less for you. So it's really about this. It's really about seeing it as an investment of time and trying to recuperate your investment. And I know this really sounds like Wall Street talk, what I'm saying, and hearing it, I don't like it, but it is the reality that we have to do. And unfortunately, more and more donors are going into that direction, offering very strict ways of tendering. So that's why sometimes going to the private sector or the philanthropists, because they have different processes, is also a bit nicer. Because yes, I think it was Cardi on your panel who said, one donor is one system. They each have their system. Yes, we have to adapt, but sometimes something a bit lighter is a bit nicer. So consider that in your strategy also. You're going to do investment. This could be a lot of time. We're going to go for it. We think it's worth it. We think we have a chance. This is a bit lighter, maybe less chance, but we tried. And you try to fan out, see different options. So that's the only way forward. But it is very difficult, and sometimes the circle doesn't complete itself, unfortunately. Sometimes you have small little gaps in the years, but that's part of your finance team then to try to manage that.
Yeah, the process is not magical. It's analytical. Right, it's just like your work for a project. You have to put that same level of rigor into your fundraising process. Yeah.
We have moved towards a model of being very deliberate about trying to create on-ramps to resources for smaller, more emerging organizations, which means we are saying up front, we are going to inherit some risk knowing that this is a new project, a new initiative, or a new organization in some cases. In many instances, they need general operating support to get off the ground. And so I think, the government, public sector vehicles, they don't always have that appetite or risk tolerance. So I think for us, at Pinterest, we're trying to think about how do we sort of make up that risk tolerance by taking a chance on more of those community-rooted, smaller, more emerging stage organizations, which means in some cases, you're right, they've got to pay the bills, they've got to keep people fed, they've got to give them benefits and a living wage to do the work. It is very difficult work when you're on the ground, when you are supporting communities and advancing things like emotional well-being or youth mental health. We recognize that takes a ton of staff capacity and resources, and to do that, we have to ensure that we're doing our part by, again, taking on some of that risk, taking on some of that overhead to support organizations who otherwise may not get access to those set of resources. And so I think, one way that we've been able to, just again recognizing the importance of working in partnership, we launched something about a year and a half ago called the Hidden Healing Fund. And this was a recognition that there are more community-rooted approaches to advancing emotional well-being that aren't necessarily what we consider like big, huge practice or practitioner-led type of initiatives. These are more culturally and community-led approaches to mental health and emotional well-being. And I'm sure these like very much exist in this space, in this sector that we're talking about. So we worked in partnership with Lululemon and MTV and others to come together, to put our resources together to support these more emerging stage community and culturally-led organizations to help them get off the ground, or in some cases scale their impact. So, in some cases, I think I'm sort of trying to push the field, both the corporate philanthropic space and the private philanthropic space, to interrogate ourselves and say, what more can we be doing to meet organizations where they are? And in some cases, that is supporting general operating resources to help advance your work, and test new solutions that haven't yet been proven out.
When you said community-led mental health solutions, I think I felt half the room jump for joy. Thank you for that leadership. But take a second on this point about the landscape, and you're working internal politics at Pinterest, and just to put a finer point on it, unlike some tech companies I could mention, you all are trying to be part of the solution. How do we, as a community, help encourage more companies to be like Pinterest, and how does that relate to kind of your place in the landscape of tech?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you for that. By the way, we do. We have a long-standing commitment to our users, and I mentioned before that our user base is growing. It's increasingly young. We're actually seeing an uptick amongst young men on our platform who are coming to the platform for new ideas around their own well-being. And so I think for us, we really take time to do the work internally first. The biggest lever for impact that we have is our platform. So first, making sure that both from our community guidelines, the work that our trust and safety team is doing to mitigate things like the proliferation of hate speech or other violative content on our platform, we really take that serious. And at the first moment that we see that content is taking off on our platform, we act immediately. And we try to be transparent around what those guidelines are, what the systems and processes that we have in place to address that kind of content. And we're working in close partnership with community organizations every day to help inform and keep us smart on the issues. You're giving us a lot of credit, but what I know is that the boundaries of social media are quite porous. And so we don't rest on our laurels of we're Pinterest and we're the positive corner of the internet. We really try to keep our ear to the ground, and that's another thing that I think is instructive for folks in this room is how can you make organizations like Pinterest, like the tech sector, smarter on the issues that you're trying to solve for. Gone are the days where you can just be solving for an issue in real life and online. We have to be thinking about more hybrid, integrated approaches to addressing things like hate-fueled violence in communities and online. And we can't do that on our own in a windowless conference room in Silicon Valley. We really do look to our impact partners, the groups that we work with through our philanthropic giving, but we also look to others in civil society to keep us smart on the issues. So I think it's, both one, getting our house in order and being very rigorous about that, being deeply connected to folks that have closer proximity to the issues and communities that we are trying to solve for. And you guys are integral to that. And 3 is, just sort of constantly evaluating what's working, what's not working, and not being afraid to be honest with ourselves about, hey, this particular policy needs refining. This particular approach, we're not super smart on it. Let's bring in people with more expertise in that issue, and be open and flexible to where they may guide us.
Yeah, and thank you. And I want to give Pinterest credit, not because you're perfect, because no one is, but I've experienced a lot of tech companies that the phrase is they give you the Heisman. And you have, as I would say to my 4-year-old, you have your listening ears on, and you understand that it's a process with feedback. Take one more second on this. You mentioned young men, and I've said it before at this conference, I'll say it 1,000 times if I need to. Misogyny is the lifeblood of hate-fueled violence. And you floored me recently with just data that young men are flocking to Pinterest, which I would not have guessed absent you telling me. So thank you for being part of the solution. If we all, because it is a priority topic for a lot of our partners, how can we help you kind of shape that work?
I think one, I know that it's not maybe a word that is, I don't know, I haven't been here for the full conference, so I don't know how much this word has come up, but we think a lot about joy and things like delight, and what does it look like to create an affirming space for young men online, right? Like, there's no shortage of negative spaces that, really take advantage of those moments where we are just not our better selves, our best selves. And we know that young people, particularly young men, are susceptible to those rabbit holes that you can go down. And so for us, we are, and we're, I'd love to, partner with folks in this room to keep us smart, is, what are young men craving? I think they're craving social connection, right? We've seen rates of loneliness skyrocket amongst young people writ large. And I think they would even tell you that, hey, when I have a positive experience online, that's actually helpful. When I'm able to connect with someone who shares my experience, that is actually, in some ways that could be helpful and useful to the emotional well-being of a young person. So I think, we look for people who've got, sort of a deep understanding, who are proximate to young people, to young men, in this case, to answer your question, Ryan. And we want to understand what are the trends that you're seeing with them, but also what is it going to take to make them feel centered, to feel seen, to feel uplifted, and to feel like there are safe, affirming spaces for them online that center their joy and their delight. I know, crazy words that you would not expect someone to raise, but in this context. But I think that's really important, having those affirming, I think, inspiring places where they can get ideas, where they can connect with others, where they can, find new interest and share their own interest in creative concepts, is really important. We need more of those spaces online and off. So we look to partner with folks in this room to keep us smart, not just on the negative trends, but what are the things that we could be scaling up that we know actually affirm, center, and uplift young men.
Amazing. Thank you. And can I just put in a plug? Next year at Eradicate Hate, let's have a workshop on creating joy. Not just in the target demos that we work with, but ourselves too. Antoine, to paraphrase the saying, time flies when you're solving global challenges. We're ready for some final thoughts. Can you help close us out?
I would say you're not alone. There's a lot of people in this room who are in the same boat. We're happy to be in the boat. Reach out to people, test ideas with us, reach out, ask questions, exchange business cards, or if you don't use business card, whatever you use, exchange contact information, but you're not alone. And try to have people around you to help you create that creativity, open the new doors. As I said, take a chance, believe in yourself, try, and you don't know what's going to happen. Yes, these are tough times. We all feel it, but I think if we stick together and we work together, we can go through it and we can come out better. So I say, you're not alone. Reach out to others, ask questions, come together, work together, and we can find beautiful solutions.
Last thoughts.
Oh gosh, that's heavy. I'd say I'm going to touch back on the main points that I raised before that I think are sort of the key takeaways. One, get rigorous about your own strategy and rigorous about understanding what is the strategy of the organization, whether that's the corporate entity, the government, the private funder that you are speaking with. Understand what are the shared challenges that they are trying to solve for, and you come to them with a solution to that, and I guarantee you will be met with folks that are willing to partner and willing to support that work. I think, two, the power of collective impact, working not just in this sector, but thinking about how do we reach out and work across sectors to address these big thorny issues. So the power of collective impact. And then third is not limiting, this is just a selfish piece on for the corporate sector, not limiting the ask to just monetary resources, but also thinking about what is the in-kind and expertise resources that companies have to offer and drilling in there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I mean, look, create process, invest in data, invest in relationships and partnerships. I mean, these are key themes that we've seen throughout all of our panels, but not to be lost on the fundraising piece. So thank you for that wisdom. I want to just acknowledge it's going to be tough. It's not without severe challenge. And as I said up front, we're facing a tough couple of years. As a sector, we will be creative, we will innovate, we will grow, and we will make the world safer and more conducive to belonging. We will. But we need to be clear-eyed that it's going to be a tough moment, but that we're not alone. This global movement represented by this conference is your team. And I'm honored to be on your team. And I want to help you and lift all of us up. So never forget that you are not alone. And I want to thank Eradicate Hate for giving us that opportunity to feel the love and support and camaraderie of this room. Because together, we're going to make it work. We will adapt or die. And I believe in us. We will adapt. Thank you.